let me paint a picture for you. I'm 12. I just finished 6th grade in Vermont at an extremely small school in Vermont, where my class was actually like the largest class in the entire elementary school, because we had a whopping 16 kids, you know. I just finished 6th grade, leaving that elementary school, about to start junior high, my 7th year, and I'm losing my mind. It's summer break, and I have so much anxiety. My mind is just making up these ludicrous, either power fantasies or incredible nightmares about what junior high is going to be like, and I'm really scared. And I'm really I'm full of momentum. I'm full of like an adolescent momentum, and I'm just thinking about, like, you know, super small town, and over there it's like, oh man, there's like 100 kids per class. Oh wow, like all these different people, all these different friends or girls, and crafting my own identity. And that summer break was scary as fuck. I was listening to Sticks and Stones by Newfound Glory, had just released. I remember that was in my ear. My ears were full of My Friends Over You. But what really spoke to me most was reruns of My So-Called Life on television. They would play it on a station called The N, or The Noggin, which I don't really think is known for much, apart from being the American broadcasting home of Degrassi, The Next Generation. When they weren't playing Degrassi, they were just non-stop airing reruns of My So-Called Life. And when I was 12 and 13, all through my first year of junior high, 7th grade, my first year of junior high, My So-Called Life was like, was everything I had. You know, it was my survival guide to an entire atmosphere that seemed so foreign to me, that seemed kind of scary and entirely exciting. Angela and Rayanne and Ricky and Brian and Jordan and Sharon, these were my friends. I would come home every day and hang out with my fucking besties. You know, I would come home every day, and it'd be like I'd be seeing my own problems on the screen, because I really didn't feel like I really didn't feel represented by a lot of what I had available to watch. You know, mind you, this was like a year before the OC or One Tree Hill would even be on television, and I was too young to play catch up with Buffy or Dawson's Creek. So the reruns of My So-Called Life, that was my first introduction to teen drama, and how powerful it can be, and how special it can be to precisely the right kind of person. And me at 13 years old, 12 or 13, My So-Called Life, I would not have survived junior high school without it. I would not have survived without Angela Chase, without Rayanne. I would not have been able to survive without these people. My So-Called Life is so special to me and so important because if you follow this channel, you know I love teen drama more than I love anything else, you know. And My So-Called Life was the first teen drama I ever fell in love with. So, and it's still one of the best. Okay, Winnie Holtzman, the creator and showrunner of My So-Called Life, absolute genius dramatist. She's incredible. She's outrageously gifted, and each character in My So-Called Life are brilliant, are so full, and they mean so much to me. And I refuse to strip my own nostalgia away from the experience or from this analysis, because that would be entirely deceitful and dishonest. Because teen shows, they matter to us because we grow with them. Right? Because that's the benefit of having a long-running teen show. You have something like a One Tree Hill or a Dawson's Creek. Like, you age with them. Adolescence, maturity is a deconstruction of youth. You age with these characters. But what about the shows that don't even get a full season? What about the shows that get canceled 19 episodes in, like My So-Called Life. Winnie Holtzman had something incredible to say about it. I really need to read you this quote because it's one of the most aching quotes that I've ever read from a showrunner, and I think it's going to be the basis for our analysis. Let me find it. I wasn't able to say this at the time, but in retrospect, it was a blessing for it to end at a time when we all enjoyed doing it. That's not to say that if the network had ordered more shows, I wouldn't have given it my best. But there was a rightness in how short the season was. This was a show about adolescence and sort of ended in its own adolescence. There was an aura about how short the series was, like all things that die young. The show ended at a point that it was still all potential. Officially, the show was canceled because its appeal was far too narrow. Much like what would happen with Freaks and Geeks later, that I think My So-Called Life is better than Freaks and Geeks, but they're unique and they're very interesting in the idea that these are shows that didn't actually get a complete first season that continue to have this massive cult appeal. Shows like My So-Called Life crawled so that others could run. You wouldn't have Freaks and Geeks without My So-Called Life, and I think My So-Called Life is just better written. I think that its characters are far more interesting because they are more theatrical. Because Freaks and Geeks would focus on the awkward sincerity of youth, whereas My So-Called Life, they recognize the performative trappings of growing up. What's always so fascinating about these characters is that Holtzman kind of crafted each of these archetypes into roles where they try to not necessarily weaponize or sanitize themselves, but to step outside of themselves, not in a way that's entirely unique or original, but in a way that completely tries to lift the behaviors of their friends. You think of Rayanne trying out for that play for Our Town and crafting her entire performance on Angela, who she semi-secretly wants to be like. She's jealous of that innocence, so she adopts her characteristics. Hell, in that episode, she even assumes the role of her passions, right? She sleeps with Jordan Catalano in that episode. Like these are kids who are doing these performative things, pretending that they are other people, but not just any other people, but the people in their lives. Angela, when she tries to not seem so innocent, wears her hair and tries to act a certain way of Rayanne. Every one of these characters are like this. Jordan trying to act like he's smarter in the very last episode by having Brian speak through him, by adopting his speech patterns, his syntax, his heartfelt messaging. My So-Called Life recognizes that being a teenager is largely a performative exercise. You are out there putting on a performance of rituals, sure, but it's a performance of identity, trying to figure out exactly who you are, which is an impossibility. That it's the tragedy of human existence. Your identity is never something that is solidified. The best it could be is codified by your experiences and by what the people around you see you as, which you always hate, which you always don't like yourself through others' eyes. You feel weaker or you feel vulnerable and exposed. These kids are extremely touching, hypersensitive. I love each and every one of them. But Angela and Rayanne are completely my favorite characters. Rayanne's my favorite character on the show. AJ Langer did an extraordinary job playing this character, and this character really spoke to me as this kind of as this wrecking ball archetype with drug and alcohol problems, which I still battle with occasionally. I'm still trying to stay clean and get clean. It's a constant cycle of letting my friends down and those kinds of things, mistakes that we knew we were making. the unconscious wishes to punish those that mean the most to us. Like Rayanne is a completely fascinating character, and she's my favorite character on the whole show. The pathos with her is extraordinary. Claire Danes as Angela Chase is, I mean, that's iconic. That's another one of my favorite characters. I love that our main character is so crushingly aching, so remarkably relatable, and so full of want, and it's not even like she's yearning for authenticity. She's wanting to feel real without ever pausing to understand what real is. It's a beautiful thing. Ricky is an entirely important character, like one of the most significant characters in teen drama. I still think that Ricky is probably the most constructive and revolutionary queer characters like ever in television. Ricky's incredible, and his character is insanely good. I remember being 12 years old, and it's like his homeless episode, and we are told the difference between runaway kids and throwaway kids. Like my life was never the same after that. After that, like, stunning, like, my sheltered existence, realization that there are throwaway kids who people don't want. And Ricky was one of those kids, and, like, I mean, it's because of this show that I do, like, volunteer at homeless shelters and stuff, like, to this day, because I'm like, man, Ricky could be there, not literally, obviously, I do volunteer at homeless shelters, and this definitely, My So-Called Life is a huge reason why. Characters like Ricky mean a lot to all of us, regardless of orientation. But if you are gay, then that character speaks volumes. I think. I think the character is incredible. Now, I may not be gay, but Jared Leto is just hot as fuck, dude. Like Jordan Catalano is a great character. And I know that Jared Leto is like a bit self-deprecating when it comes to his contributions to My So-Called Life. He's like, I barely talked in it, but I guess girls saw a certain something in that. They did, Jared. They saw something incredibly important within you. I love Jordan Catalano, this objectively stupid, angelic-looking young man who has so many feelings inside of him. The world would tremble if he could only articulate any one of them. If he could only articulate himself, Jordan Catalano would be the most like poetic and tender character ever. And that's the tragedy of Jordan Catalano. It's that he's too stupid to understand the concept of sincerity. But he feels it, though. I have to believe that he feels it. I like Sharon a lot, too. Sharon is this wonderful character. Her best scenes, in my opinion, are with Rayanne, with their kind of frenemies dynamic that they have. Brian is my least favorite of all of the characters, but he is so good. He is so perfect. Just because he's my least favorite does not mean I find him unlikable. He's a harrowing character. I feel really bad for him, like on the Christmas episode where he calls the hotline because he's just so depressed and like no one cares. But Rayanne turns the suicide hotline into a like a sex line, like a phone sex line, and really cheers Brian up. You know, this show is perfect. Okay, this show is perfect. I've been asked what's my top 10 teen drama of all time. I can't do that for you. I can't do a top 10. I've seen a lot of teen drama. I've covered a lot of teen drama on this channel. But the reason I can't do a top 10 is because I haven't seen Gossip Girl, and I'm pretty sure that it would impact the list. Like, it looks like something I would just go gaga over. But I can give you a top 5. I'm pretty sure my top 5 will never change. In no particular order. I can't stay loyal to structure here, like specific structures or placements within the list. But my top 5 favorite teen dramas are like One Tree Hill, Dawson's Creek, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Veronica Mars, and My So-Called Life. My So-Called Life may not have run for an entire season or may have been canceled after just one, but there are so many emotions in that first season. There are so you feel so much, and it has so much power in its first season. It has more power in these 19 episodes than most shows have over 900. Like, that's no exaggeration. This show is so well structured. This show had such a good idea of its own identity, which is remarkable because none of the characters in it have any clue what their identity is. They have no clue who they are, but this show knew exactly what it was when it started. You know, this is the peak 90s show. This is 1994 to 95, baby. This is real 90s. This is oh well, whatever, never mind. This is that, probably the most nihilistic any generation has ever been in the history of generations, okay, is the mid-90s. When the slacker has been weaponized against itself, that is what My So-Called Life tracks. Where postmodernism has deconstructed everything down to dust, and now nothing means anything anymore. And now the kids are the ones who have to find the new sincerity within it, but no one can make sense of the broken and disparate objects of this destroyed room that we call growing up. That's what My So-Called Life is about. It's about growing up in the destroyed room of identity. That's what My So-Called Life is. My So-Called Life is also very, very funny. My So-Called Life is extremely touching. My So-Called Life is wonderfully filmed. There's a real lyrical, musical sort of atmosphere to the piece. I love the intro. I love how airy and ethereal and just moody and dreamlike it feels. The introduction song. And I love how the school is dirty and falling apart. They're in the bathroom and the lights keep flickering on and off, and there's dirt and crud fucking everywhere. And these kids have to make sense or consider these days the best of their lives when their school resembles a broke down warehouse more than it does a learning facility. Like, this is real shit. This is great. And I love that there's this narration to tie you down to this feeling, because there are fantastical elements here, but it's the element of expectation, because you expect the fantasy, but what you are given is not necessarily lesser than fantasy. It's entirely different and not only undefendable, but you can't categorize it. Undefinable. Unknowable. And there's the contradiction of being entirely foreign yet extremely intimate. That's what actual life is. Something that is almost cinematic, but lacks the contrived construction. I said teenagers are performative, but I never said they were great actors, you know? Like, that's what My So-Called Life is about. These kids acting in a certain way, performing certain character tropes that they learned from television or from their siblings or parents or society. Like, these kids are acting in a certain way, but it doesn't mean that they're pulling it off. It doesn't mean that they're fooling anyone. And it certainly doesn't mean they're even fooling themselves. This is a show about trying to find identity in the destroyed room of coming of age, of growing up, the destroyed room of life, my so-called one, that is. Yeah, much like Freaks and Geeks, this was canceled due to its narrow appeal. So Claire Danes was also going to leave the show anyway. After the first season, she wanted to focus on school. Claire Danes was actually 14. If you go Google searching this show, you'll regret it almost instantly, because you'll see headlines like, Jared Leto at 21 taught Claire Danes how to make out at 14 on My So-Called Life. He seemed ancient, she says. That... oh, God, dude, that's so... Oh, my God, fuck off. Sometimes I don't like learning more about my favorite shows, but whatever, you do what you must, I guess. I love the show completely. I am glad that it ended here, because as I was saying at the beginning, shows like Dawson's Creek, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, One Tree Hill, you grow up with those characters. Gilmore Girls, you grow up with those characters in real time, and you mature with them. When they experience new things in life, so do you. The show becomes more relatable, and your emotional bond with it grows stronger on account of that. But what about My So-Called Life? The shows that end far too young. The shows about adolescents that end in their own adolescence. They're crystallized. They're always at war with all of those different parts that conflict within them. All those broken parts of themselves, or all those amazing, unique, quirky parts. It was a show about adolescence that ended in its own adolescence. And there was a rightness to it, like everything that dies young. It ended at a point where it was all still potential. It makes my memories of My So-Called Life far more potent, because I can't imagine Angela Chase graduating. I can't imagine Jordan Catalano's unimpressive future. I can't imagine Brian at college, because we never got that. These kids in My So-Called Life will always be 15 or 16 years old. Always and forever. It will always be a reminder of your own adolescence. An invitation to not only rewatch, but revisit those parts of your own youth that you're still working through, or the parts of your youth that you need to remember. Shows about adolescents that end in their own adolescence. There's something obviously intrinsically tragic about that concept, but there's also something more special in the shows that last forever. Because there's a poetic beauty to the short lives of canceled teen dramas. And that these characters are beautiful and they're perfect. And they're beautiful and perfect because they are imperfect. And because they have flaws. And because it is all still potential. Angela and Rayanne means so much to me. I would die for them. High school is a battlefield that my so-called life is fighting in perpetuity, forever. It's always there if you need it. And you always will. These characters are always here for you. And so are the issues that they face and the problems that they have. They're universal. I love My So-Called Life. I think it's a masterpiece. It's a masterful show. There's not a single bad episode. There are so many unforgettable moments. Nearly every moment is unforgettable to me because it makes me remember everything about the summer break before junior high started. And how I wanted to meet a girl like Angela Chase there, you know? Like, I wanted to meet my Angela Chase, my innocent rebel who didn't know what she was rejecting, but just wanted to feel something real. I loved My So-Called Life, and every time I watch it, I'm 12 and 13 again, and these characters mean more and more to me over time. I grow. I have new experiences, but they don't. And that's partly the tragedy of these characters in My So-Called Life, but that's also certainly the beauty of them. They remind me of my own integrity, my virtue, and I don't ever want me at 15 to hate me. There's a truthful sincerity to them. And I want to keep that sensitivity with me everywhere that I go. Thank you for watching my video about My So-Called Life. I'm your cult boyfriend. Comment, share, like, or don't do any of those things. But do you remember? Remember when? Just remember when.